everyone, and welcome to the Applied Ballistics Quantum walkthrough complete video. This video is going to cover how to use Applied Ballistics Quantum from start to finish. It's going to be quite a long video, over an hour long, so grab a cup of coffee, have a seat, and welcome. Hopefully this will be helpful. Please like and subscribe to our videos. Also, if you have any questions, you can put them down in the comments below or send us a support ticket through the app, and we'll show you all how to do that here in a little bit. So without much else, let's get started. And we're going to start where you should always start with the app, and that is on the settings page. So we'll go down here to the settings page, and we'll start from the top. So here we have our current app level. We're on a pro level. The purchase level for this app is Elite, but the account level is Pro. If you have a device paired, it'll say, and we'll show you this here in a little bit, it'll actually say your license level, and the app will take the highest level from each of these. Currently, that's Pro. You can manage your subscriptions by clicking on this button here. Moving down, we have our unit settings. Really, this is completely customizable however you want it, but you should go through these one at a time. So we have our range units, we have our muzzle velocity units, the gun parameter units, hold precision. This is if you want your firing solutions to be precise or if you want it to round to the nearest whole number for you. Your hold indicator on the shoot screen or the HUD, you can have the blue arrows, you can just have it say up, down, left, right, or just have a plus or minus next to it for your firing solution. Your table hold indicators, that's the same thing except for the range card and the target card. Bullet weight, temperature, pressure units, altitude units. This is for density, altitude, output. Wind speeds, customizable, energy, targets, alpha or numeric. On the target card, because you can have multiple targets on the target card, you can set if you'd rather them be 1 through 12 or alpha through Juliet. It's entirely up to you how you want those indicated. The fire control settings. This allows you to turn aerodynamic jump, spindrift, and Coriolis on and off. Some users prefer to have those on, some off, so you can turn those on and off here in the settings. General app settings. The show welcome screen setting means that each time you turn the app on after you close it, do you want it to start on the welcome screen? If you select yes, that screen we were just on, the home screen, that's the screen you'll start on. If you select no, it'll go to the last menu screen that you were on. Keep screen on. This just determines if you want the phone to fall asleep when you haven't touched it after a certain amount of time. So whether you leave that on or on is personal preference. I recommend it on if you're using it a lot at the range so it doesn't go to sleep while you're looking at the firing solution, but it's there. You can pick which way you prefer to have it. Touch feedback is haptic feedback. When you press a button in the app, do you want to get that physical feedback back from the app that you pushed a button? The app theme, it's in dark mode right now, but you can force it into light mode like this, or you can force it into automatic where it follows the phone, or you can leave it locked in dark mode. I tend to just leave it in auto mode. Clear targets, this will clear the target card, and we'll talk about that a little later, but this nukes the target card and clears all entries on it. The Cloud Sync service right here. So this is for backing up your profiles. If you want your profiles to back up to the cloud, this only does two things, and that's one of them. Then you need to be signed in here. The other thing that this does is for users who are grandfathered in from AB Mobile 2.0 and have a grandfathered account that's an Elite account. If you sign out of Cloud Sync, then the app is not going to be able to determine if you're a past user, and you will actually lose that and be reverted to ultralight. You'll need to stay signed in if you want to retain that, because the app has to see that you're a previous user. The delete account function, there is no coming back from this if you do it. You can delete your account and all the associated data if you so wish. The share usage data, the only thing this shares with us is bug reports and how the app is functioning. So I recommend opting into this because this is the reason we've been able to make so many changes, so many bug fixes, track issues, and get these fixes out in such a timely manner. Without y'all's help in sharing that data, we couldn't do it. This does not track your texts and your phone calls. It's not spyware, nothing like that. All it does is it helps us find bugs when the app crashes or encounters a problem. Moving down here, we have the user manual. If you click view, it will bring up a copy of the user manual for you to address if you would like to look through it and maybe find answers to certain things. This is the current bullet library version. As of today, April 3rd, 2025, you should be on at least this bullet library version. This means there are 3,198 bullets in the library, including PDMs, and there are 9 revisions that were released in the last update. The last 2 numbers basically tell us that there was an update to bullets that are already in the library, and the first set of numbers tells you how many total bullets are in that library. Then you have the date. Then you have the reticle library version number. That's not how many reticles are in the library. That's the current version number. And we're getting ready to do another update in about a month or so that's going to add some more and a couple more companies. There's the app build version. So this tells you which version of the app you're on and the build number. You should be on 3.3.0 or newer as of April 3rd, 2025. All right. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to the device menu. So the device menu is where you pair and manage your devices. And we're not going to do that yet, but just be aware that this is where you pair and manage your devices. If you don't see your device automatically populating in this menu, for instance, let me turn on this rangefinder real quick. And you can see that device, that Kilo 10K Gen 2 automatically populates. It could be for one of 2 reasons. The first one is your device that you're trying to pair isn't yet or isn't compatible with AB Quantum. And if that's the case, just click Don't See Your Device to see the list of currently compatible devices. The other reason is this only applies to Garmin currently, but some devices pair a little differently. For Garmin devices, there's a video we published that shows how to pair Garmin devices. They need to be paired to Garmin Connect first and then to AB Quantum, and then they'll show up. You do have see more information on some of these. The plus button if you'd like them to be, if you want to add them to the app, and we'll go over adding a device later. I don't want to do that just yet for a reason. The next in the navigation bar, currently I'm using the navigation bar to travel through the app here. You can see the current page that we're on because this little blue tick mark circled right here, that tells us what page we're on. But there is another navigation menu. If I open this up, it'll take us to the home screen. Or we can click this support button at any time. If you encounter a problem with the app, if you're having issues or if you're having questions, send us that support request. Hit the button, hit support, and send us that email, and we'll be happy to assist you. Okay? And we can navigate through the welcome screen here by tapping on any of these, or by navigating down here through the navigation bar. So let's continue forward here, and let's go to profiles next. So in profiles, we'll start at the top. We have a Bluetooth indicator. This tells us whether or not we are currently connected to a Bluetooth device. If you're trying to send profiles from AB Quantum to a Bluetooth device, it's a good thing to have to see whether or not it's actually connected at the time you're trying to send them. Also, the Bluetooth icon down here will light up, and I'll demonstrate that later if you do have a device active working alongside the app. This Cloud Sync icon tells you whether or not your profiles in the app are synced to the cloud. That little check mark that you see in the Cloud Sync icon says, yes, your profiles in the app match the cloud. If you don't see that, that means that they're not currently synced to the cloud and lined up. The next symbol that we have here is to create a new profile. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to walk through creating a profile now because we're going to work from top to bottom through these different menus. All right, so if I wanted to create a new profile, there are a couple ways to do it. I just click the plus symbol. One is actually if you have a QR code from someone else, you can just scan it. So when I click this, it's going to open up. We're going to allow the camera so that we can scan a profile. Now other users, I'm going to discard these changes real quick, or yourself can create a profile to export like this. If I click on this and I click export, here's a QR code that would be scanned there to import that profile. Okay, so you can export and import. Going back in here, when we are creating a profile, if we ever need to change the settings, because let's say I want to do my scope height in centimeters instead of inches, you can click this gear icon, and I can go here to say gun parameters, change it to centimeters, and you'll see now it says centimeters. Okay, so you do have that option to change the settings at any time when you're creating a profile through that gear icon. Moving down, we have our profile name. We have our bullet data block. So here in our bullet data block, we can select from the bullet library. So I can input all of this information. If I just tapped on one of these, I can just manually, let's say I go here and I say my BC is 0.500 and hit done. And you can see I can change these information, these blocks manually. Also, if you don't know the G7, but you do know the G1 because the company doesn't publish it, you can put the G1 in there and it will automatically calculate the G7 for you, a comparable G7 for you. Just an FYI. Another trick when you're doing this information is if I don't know the bullet length because it's factory ammo, but I input all of this information, the app can give you a best estimate of that bullet length. There you are. If you don't know it and you don't want to pull it or have the ability to pull that bullet. So just know that those options are available to you. But you also have the bullet library. And from here, we can select anything we want from this library. So I can go here and I can pick a bullet at random. Now, you'll see here it says that we can pick a G1 and G7 or a custom drag model. If you're on the ultralight version of the app, you will not see this custom drag model option, but you will still have the G1 and G7. If I select that CDM, the BC should read 1.0. It does. And all of this data, this is the only data that self-populates. Nothing else is from that library. But all this data is populated. But I can also still switch between G1, G7, and CDM if you so choose. So just be aware of that option that's there. Scrolling down now, gun data. Here we have our muzzle velocity, our zero range, our twist rate. Let's go ahead and set this to say 8. You would input this information. If you have a compatible Bluetooth chronograph like the speed tracker, this information will self-populate, and I'll show you that here in a minute on another profile. But generally speaking, you would input all of this. Now you may notice that this stability gradient or stability factor is 1.35. That's because our twist rate is too slow. A moment ago, it was even worse. So let's go ahead and say I have a 9 twist barrel for some reason. 1.06. If I click on this more information button here, it'll tell me I should have a 1 in 7.5. So if you're trying to figure out what barrel twist should I really have for this cartridge, the app will tell you right here. In this case, the BC is being reduced by about 13% due to that twist rate. It can get even worse. A moment ago, the number was red because it had a 10 twist barrel, 0.86. Here we'll take a peek again, and you can see by 19% now. It says 19%. So you do have this tool at your disposal. So let's go ahead and just keep moving down though. Twist left or right is selected here. And sight height, this is from the center of the bore to the center of your windage knob vertically. Don't measure the diagonal, just measure the true vertical distance between those two. But that should be your sight height. Scrolling down now, we'll go to scope properties. So for scope units, and this will be how the app outputs your firing solution, you have all these options for scope units. If you want, you can scroll down by the way, if you want your firing solution in inches or centimeters, then select inches or centimeters. If you want it in mils or MOA or clicks, just select the scope units that you wish to use. Selecting, you can leave this turned off. If you leave the rifle scope function turned off, it will not hurt anything. This is for the reticle output display. But you can select from a scope. We have some general non-manufacturer options here if you would like, but we also have a bunch of scopes from many companies, and you can pick from any one of these, and then you can pick a sub-reticle. Now, with that being said, sometimes, let me see here, maybe Burris should do it that way. Sometimes you'll find that there are second focal plane scopes like these, prisms, fixed power scopes, and the first focal plane scope is separated out. Then Burris makes a lot of scopes that have these reticles in them. However, because they're first focal plane, their min and max magnification isn't truly critical. But with that being said, let's go down to Leupold. And here you'll find, I'm going to scroll down here to, I think, the VX6 HD. So here you'll find like the 3 to 18 second focal plane version. And sometimes you'll even find, let's see here. So here's the fire dot duplex in 1 to 6. Here's the fire dot duplex in 2 to 12, in 3 to 18. So these are second focal plane scopes, and in this case it does matter because the magnification matters. And we'll go over that a little bit later, or you can watch, we have a video for the scopes and reticles that covers that in greater detail. So just note that first focal plane scopes might be found under a first focal plane category, depending on how the scope, the information came and how the scopes are laid out from that company. All right, so let's go ahead and back out of that. And now we're going to go to the advanced settings here under the scope. So the first thing we have is sighting conditions. If you want to enter the 0 conditions when you sighted the rifle in, you can do that. This is intended for long range zeros, 250 yards, 300 yards, things like that. Sighting conditions is not intended for a 100-yard zero, which is really only affected by aerodynamic jump and not much else. A good 100-yard zero should not shift with a change in altitude or a change in temperature. The zero shouldn't. Now, your muzzle velocity might, and we'll go over that here in a minute, but this is for long-range zeros, generally speaking. The next thing we have here is our gun and scope advanced properties. So zero height and zero offset, this is used a couple of ways. One of the ways this is used is if you have a suppressor. If I remove a suppressor, then there's going to be a zero shift if I zeroed it with it on. You can put that zero shift here so you can have two profiles, one with the suppressor on and one with it off. You can also use this if your scope is zeroed for different ammunition. Maybe you shoot a 300 blackout with supersonic and subsonic projectiles. Maybe you zero it for the subsonic projectiles, and you can place your zero offset and height offsets for the supersonic ammunition in this slot. There's a couple of different cases where you'd use these zero height and zero offsets, but what it is when you go to shoot on paper and the bullet impacts are not exactly centered in the zero for whatever reason. If your scope only has 1/3 MOA clicks, if you have a suppressor you've taken off, whatever it may be, that's what that input's for. Sight scale factor and elevation and windage, this is for when you perform a tall target test. So when you do a scope calibration, you're going to get a number off of the tall target test worksheet that we provide on our website, and that's the number that you're going to input into sight scale factor, elevation, and windage. Otherwise, if you're not using these, they should be 1.0. Next thing is the muzzle velocity temperature table. You can, and this is where your shift can happen with changes in temperatures, but you can input up to 6 of these, and there's a video covering this in detail, but you input the temperature and the velocity at the time that you got that temperature into this box, and what this allows you to do is it allows for the app to adjust your muzzle velocity with changes in temperature. Now, when you use this, when you've activated this, there'll be a muzzle, and I'll show you in another profile, there'll be an indicator on the outside of the profile that says, hey, this has an NV temperature table, because a couple of things happen when that's in use. Okay. Drop scale factor. This is a calibration tool, but you can see your DSF table from inside your profile if you wish to, and you can clear it. And then you have a notes section here. Let's go ahead and discard this profile, and I want to show you a couple things. Here you can see that the BC is red. I'll scroll down here a little bit, and you'll see the CDM is red here as well. That indicates, when you see this, this indicates that you have a SG below 1.5. Let's go in here and take a look real quick. And I'm going to scroll down. You can see here our SG is below 1.5. That's why that indicator is there, and why. Essentially, this rifle could use a faster twist barrel. Another thing to note from that, taking a look here, is you can see here this symbol because we used a speed tracker to gather this data. I'm going to go back in. By the way, clicking on this little pencil icon or opening the menu and clicking edit does the same thing. Now I'm going to go down here and you'll see the muzzle velocity is actually grayed out. I can't adjust this because we're using the data from the speed tracker. I can untick that box and go back to the muzzle velocity I had put in place when I created the profile. Now, scrolling down in this profile, sorry about that, here, speed tracker. Going to the speed tracker data in this profile, we can actually see more data from that test. And so you do have that option if you have a speed tracker to integrate directly into the app. There will be more chronographs that are app compatible. Not all chronographs at this time are app compatible, but there will be more that are coming here in the future. But just note that that's grayed out because we're using the data from the speed tracker. Another time that you may see, and we're going to discard those changes, another time you might actually see that muzzle velocity grayed out is, I'm going to scroll down here. There it is. So here we have a muzzle velocity temperature table. Here's an indicator that tells us that. And I'm going to go ahead and go into this profile so that we can see that. I'm going to scroll down. And so here you can see there's a muzzle velocity temperature table that's been built on this profile. Now, if I scroll up, I can edit my muzzle velocity currently. But if I activate this table, which I'll do now, I can no longer edit this muzzle velocity, and it's going to show me the current muzzle velocity based on the atmospherics. It says 2924 due to the current temperature the app sees. And if I disable it and go back up, you'll see that it reverts back to that 2950 and it's no longer grayed out. So just be aware that that indicator is there and will indicate whenever the muzzle velocity temperature table is turned on. We have this little arrow here. This allows us to set the current profile as the active profile. For instance, if I just tapped this one and brought it up into the active slot, you can see it's now active. And if I go down to bring that profile back into the active slot, I can also do it by hitting the menu button, set as active, and now it's up here in the active slot. One more thing that you can do, if you have more than one profile, if you only have a single profile, you can't delete them, but you can delete and duplicate. So I'll open the menu, I'll delete, and I can delete a profile if I'd like to. You can sort the profiles by clicking on this button here. You can sort them by name, by caliber, or in this default sorting. And you can search for them using the text search box if you would like to prefer to do that. In here, on the menu, we do have edit, export. I can duplicate. If I already built this rifle and I have another ammunition, if this is my 300 Blackout, and I wanted to build another profile for the 300 Blackout using supersonic ammo, I could duplicate it, duplicate 90% of it, and just change that ammo profile to make it easy for building one gun and multiple bullets. And there's other reasons to duplicate. If I wanted to build a profile for when the suppressor is off the rifle, I can duplicate and have a suppressed and an unsuppressed version and stuff like that. Okay. All right. So that's the profile screen, and that's really pretty much all of the profile screen. That's the gist of it. So let's go ahead and move forward now to the big menu. I will say at any time you can go to the home menu or send a support ticket by tapping on the center icon. And even when I go to the shoot menu here and I tap on the center icon, you can see we still have those functions. All right, so let's go ahead and walk our way now through the shoot menu moving forward here. From top to bottom, here we have our current profile. I can quick edit this profile if I wanted to by tapping here and opening it up and making changes if I would like to. Okay. I can also access the device menu by tapping here on the Bluetooth icon, and I'll go back to the device menu. And I can see information about my current subscription level by tapping here where it says I have a pro subscription. There we are. Now, moving down, here's our firing solution in the HUD. Here's our current elevation. Something to note, the output here is in mils. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up the range card for a second here. And here in the range card, you can see also that our output's in mils. Well, if I wanted that to be an MOA, I'll do it this way. I would tap here, or even inches. Okay, so some people want to see their drop in inches. I'll go ahead and bring this up, and I'll scroll down here and I'll change this to inches. And then I'm going to back out and save. So we are going to save. And you'll see it's now in inches. This works for clicks, mils, all of it. So these outputs here, I'll go back to the HUD, are based on our scope properties. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to switch this back to mils. So I go here, I go scope units, and that's how you can change those outputs if you so desire. And we're going to back out and we're going to save. But you can do that from here on the shoot screen. You can quick edit your current profile. You can currently see my hit probability at 250 yards with this 17 HMR based on certain WEZ parameters. If you have a pro level, which we do, you'll see these WEZ numbers. If you have ultralight or elite, that won't be there. Here you have your range. I can adjust the range a couple of ways. One way is by tapping this up and down. Another way is just by opening the dialog box by tapping on it and putting a range number and then changing it. And the third way is with a compatible device. If I have a Kestrel or a pair of binoculars, range-finding binoculars paired to the app, I can actually change that range by lasering the target. And there's other data that will come along with that, and we'll go over that later on in a section of this video dedicated strictly to using devices, okay? Let's go ahead and keep moving forward here. Here we have more ballistic information. So I can open this up and I can see more detailed ballistic information. Now, a couple of things here. Unlike the SG that was in the profile, this is one that's actually active. So if I go through here and I adjust this to our current atmospherics, oh, well, they're not that much different from the standard. So let me fix that. So there you go. So this SG number here is active and will tell you in real time what your SG is. Another thing is we currently have outputs here for some of these secondary effects. But if I go into settings and I'm going to disable a secondary effect here, spindrift. Okay. And now you can see it just says off. Spindrift is off. Now I'm going to go back. And I'm going to do that with something else. I'll turn that on. Turn Coriolis off. And now you can just see Coriolis is off. So you can actually see if you have secondary effects turned on or off, maybe on purpose, maybe by mistake. Doesn't really matter. The information's there to use as you please. So just know we have this extra ballistic information. Now this information here is at the target. So the time of flight, the impact energy, the impact velocity, the current Mach, this is at the target. If I was to go up here and change this to 300 yards, and then we took another look, you'll see that we have different numbers here, 51 foot-pounds of energy, etc. So just be aware that this data is for at the target. This velocity is not the muzzle velocity. It's your velocity at the target. For muzzle velocity, go look in your profile. The next thing that we have here is solution, reticle, and WEZ tabs. So we're currently on the Solution tab, but let's go ahead and go to the Reticle tab. And this is a reticle output display. I'm going to bring up the Reticle Controller. Controllers are managed here. By tapping on this, I'll bring up a whole slew of them. You may or may not see all of these, and I'll explain why in a minute. But let's go ahead and just bring up this Reticle Controller. The first thing to go over is this is a second focal plane scope. So because of that, the current magnification matters, and I can zoom in and zoom out to make sure the firing solution is correct. I can dial up and dial down as if I was dialing up or down in the scope, and you can see that adjustment. And I can see my subtensions or my solution. Moving on here now, we're going to move on to WEZ, our WEZ tab. In our WEZ tab here, if you have WEZ, I'm going to bring up the WEZ controller that goes along with it. We'll give you your probability of hit. In this case, 30% on this IPSC target. You do have your firing solution here at the top. Okay, and so if I go here, I can change this to 250, and you'll see the firing solution updates. So if you wanted to stay on this WEZ screen and still have your firing solution, you can. Now with WEZ, we have different target types that we can select. Some of them, like take the rectangle for instance, I can set a height and width. So I'll do a 5x5 rectangle. Okay, so I can change the shape of this target. Not all of them are that way. For instance, if I bring up the deer, it's just a standard deer. Now, another thing to keep in mind with WEZ is that you have different graph types. This is the shot simulation, but let's say I want to see my vertical uncertainty. At this distance, these are the things that are attributing to my vertical uncertainty in this profile with a low confidence level. So if I change this confidence level to high or custom, and there's a whole video on WEZ, but you can see the #1 vertical uncertainties from the rifle, then from our range calculation, then from our muzzle velocity, then bullet drag, and so on and so forth. Horizontal uncertainty. Before I open this, what do you think's the most what do you think's going to be the #1 cause of horizontal uncertainty? In this case, it's actually rifle. I know some people are going to think wind. Now, you may see this. Watch this. We don't have any wind input. These numbers are real time. So let's go ahead and input some wind and watch what happens. So we'll do this. We'll add 2. And we'll say it's gusting to 8. It's kind of a chill day. All right, now you can see the #1 uncertainty is wind. So just be aware of that. If you don't have any wind input, wind can't be the uncertainty. Okay, did that a little bit on purpose. Let's go back to WEZ. All right, so here in WEZ though, I'm going to scroll down and you're going to see we have all these custom factors that we can adjust. For instance, if I go to custom, I can say I have a BC, drag uncertainty and BCSD are relatively the same thing. Let's say I have a 3% BCSD. There you go. So with a 3% BCSD and no other factors, that's what kind of uncertainty you can expect. And we can go to the shot simulation so you can see what that looks like. All right. Something else to note that you have here, I'm going to switch this back to a high confidence shooter, and I'm going to switch this to a probability of hit chart, and then I'm going to say to 1,000 yards. And you can use this however you want, but let's open up 1,000 yards and check this out. I can see what my probability of hit looks like out to 1,000 yards. Where does it really start to fall off? At what point, if I was hunting with this rifle, would I say, not going to do it? Would it be here at 50%? Would it be here at 75% uncertainty? So you do have that as well at your disposal for users that have WEZ. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the solution. I want to talk about the target controllers next. This box here is the target controllers, which brings up these menu items. You have the environment controller, which has temperature, humidity, pressure. Winds are controlled through here. Let's go ahead and go to the target controller. The target controller has your direction of fire or azimuth, your inclination, that's the vertical angle to the target, and your current latitude. You can capture all of these off of the phone or a device. Remember, we're going to talk about devices later. And you have your moving target speed. Pay attention up here. You'll see Wind 1 and Wind 2 doesn't change whenever I adjust the moving target speed. Lead changes, but Wind 1 and Wind 2 doesn't. So they're not compounded into Wind 1 and Wind 2. Just be aware of that. They're their own output. We can estimate the speed of the target using milling here if you would like to. Currently we are in mils, but you can do it in MOA or inches or however you want. But you have this estimation tool as well at your disposal. The next target controller is going to be, or the next controller, sorry, will be WEZ. WEZ has an entire video that covers it, but here you have your controls for adjusting WEZ. 7% probability of a first round hit at 1,000 yards with a 17 HMR on an IPSC. Just something to think about there. The next controller is graphs. So the graphs controller you may or may not have allows you to do custom graphs. So let's go ahead and move on to that. Now to navigate to graphs, I tap the center button. We have these options here and I go graphs. So here I can compare. For instance, let's compare the 22 rimfire to the 17 HMR. You can do that with graphs, and this is what this controller allows you to do. Let's compare them with a 375 enabler. Let's add that into the mix and see what happens. So here we have the differences in performance for these. Now, something else to take note of here is that I have a custom graph here. So if I go to custom, I can compare whatever custom value I want. I want to compare time of flight, I can do that. If I want to compare, sorry about that. If I want to compare elevation differences, I can do that. So here's the differences. So you do have that option as well here in graphs, or you can just look at a solo. If I wanted to remove that, I could just look at the one rifle by itself. Now there is a third tab here that you may or may not have. This third tab only exists because this profile has chronograph data from a Bluetooth chronograph that was captured by the app. So I'll go ahead and take a look at that. Here we can see our different shots plotted on the graph as we were shooting over that chronograph. If I switch profiles here just to demonstrate something real quick for you, we'll switch to the 6547 and you'll see that goes away. Okay, see how there's no longer the chronograph graph? That's because that profile doesn't have chronograph data attached to it like the other one did. So that is an option that you have if you have a compatible Bluetooth chronograph. Let's go ahead and go back to the graph. So you do have that chronograph data that's graphed out for you here. Okay. So moving on here now, we'll go back to the HUD. We've covered the graph controller. Ballistic calibration. So the next thing down the list is ballistic calibration. There's an entire video that covers this in depth, but here in ballistic calibration we have our muzzle velocity calibration tool, our CDF calibration tool, and our DSF calibration tool. Our current muzzle velocity, and if we had to change, our calculated muzzle velocity, okay? Same goes for DSF. Calculated DSF and Mach information's here. If I make a change here, you can see our calculated DSF. Hitting the Use DSF button will implement it into the profile's DSF table, which you can clear using this clear button. Now there's a set of distances here that it recommends that you do these at. It is recommended that you perform these calibrations at these distances, so keep that in mind. There's a video covering why in detail that you can go watch in this video series. But just know that if you're using DSF, it really needs to be in the subsonic range or at least a good distance. You don't use DSF up close. Some users will have the CDF function. This can be used at any range greater than the 0 range. And when and why to use that is covered in another video. But once you apply a CDF, so if I do this and I have this calculated CDF and I hit apply, you can see our current CDF now updated to 0.994. If you want to clear the CDF, I'm going to have to go here into the profile, this custom drag factor block here, and I'm just going to put 1. And then I'm going to back out and save. that change, and that CDF is now reset back to 1.0 or the standard. So just be aware that's how you clear a CDF without having to delete the whole profile. But these are your ballistic calibration tools that you have at your disposal. Again, there's the Reticle Controller, which I went over earlier. And then the speed tracker controller for this current profile has speed tracker data. If you pair a compatible chronograph like the Mach 4 Plus, you can use the last shot or the average velocity from that test data, and you can create multiple test strings. So if you wanted to add more test strings, you could do that as well. So that is another option. If you're using a profile that doesn't have that data, let's go ahead and bring this one up here real quick. So we'll bring this one up. You'll see that that doesn't exist. So see how it's not there? There's also no reticle controller here, and that's because a scope has not been selected, if I check out here, for this profile. So there's nothing wrong. You just need to add or turn on the scope for that profile. All right. Now I'm going to touch on density altitude, what you see here, this DA2993. That is an output. The density altitude output is calculated based on the current atmospherics. If I go ahead and tap this to pull internet weather, you'll see it dropped to 1384. However, if you want a specific density altitude, you can input that here. So let's say I wanted a firing solution for 3500 DA. I would input 3500. It's going to change the pressure. You'll leave the temperature and humidity. These are important. They'll leave those the same. But it'll change the pressure to mimic or mirror that density altitude. And there you go. Now we have our firing solution for 3500 DA, or range card for 3500 DA. Because with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is the target card. And then we'll go to the range card. And so now this is the target card built on a 3500 density altitude, or I can just use my phone's built-in sensor. We'll go ahead and allow. It's going to get that data, and now we have the target card for the density altitude of 1359. So that is not your physical altitude, that is just a measurement, but that information is there for you if you want it. Now we're going to move forward on the target card. So the target card has some really neat things that it can do. Number one is we can input a bunch of targets here. So by clicking on, I just click the expand table button to kind of bring this into more of a view. I'll do that again. This is an export button. I can export the range or target card by clicking on this button. It'll send, you can send it in a text or an email, but it'll send a CSV file with this information. But clicking this button, I can add more targets. A neat little trick you can do with this, we'll go over it when we cover devices. You can actually just add targets by lasering a device with a laser rangefinder. So that's kind of cool. So here in the target card, we can add more targets by simply clicking that plus button. Now these targets can be customized. So I'm going to scroll right here and you'll see a bunch of data, but check this out. We have WEZ target shapes. We have these grayed out environment, target, and WEZ indicators, and then a delete button. At any time, if you want to delete a target, just click on the delete button and delete the target. Okay, and that target's gone now. These do not need to be in any specific order. 1776, 25, 1200, doesn't matter, right? They can be in any order, doesn't really matter. However, if you shoot too far, in this case, this result exceeds 15 seconds time of flight. Just note that you might lose a target, which we've done there because you're not, well, you could shoot a 1700 yards, but it's not really feasible. So with that being said, this data is all customizable. So if I select a target by tapping on it, you deselect them by tapping on it again. If I select this target, and let's say that I go to the target controller like this, and I point the phone at the target, and I get the inclination for that target. You see how the target indicator has lit up? This tells me that that target has its own custom information. I can do that again with this one. and give it its own information. So they now have their own azimuth and inclination. We can also do that with WEZ, and I'll demonstrate that real quick here by opening the WEZ controller on target Charlie. I'll make this one a deer, and I'll make it a medium confidence shooter. So we can have our own target shape for these targets. There's a whole video that covers this, but you can do your own target shapes, your own WEZ, and it can have its own unique environmentals. So let's say this has a different wind value than the other targets did. Its own wind, its own temperature, doesn't really matter. It's got its own environmental data. So you can customize the data for each target, not just its range, but also its independent target values, environment, and WEZ values. Now, if I wanted to delete these and reset them back to this, you can deselect it and you'll see that it doesn't line up with the rest of the targets. But if I wanted to delete these to reset them back, what you would do is I would just tap on the indicator here, and now I can clear the custom environment, clear the WEZ, delete the target, or clear all custom settings. In this case, I'll clear all custom settings. Or I can just tap here and clear the custom target settings. So you have an indicator there that you have custom target settings, and you can clear out settings from one unique target at a time if you wanted to without having to clear the rest. So that's pretty much the gist of the target card. Yes, there is a limit to how far you can set some targets, and the app will indicate that for you. And to change these outputs here, you would change the scope properties. Remember, we showed you that earlier. And then also, these variables like energy and velocity are changed in the settings. So if you wanted this to be in joules and this to be meters a second, you change that in the settings. Now, what data do we get on the target card? It's almost the same data as on the range card. You get your elevation, your wind 1, your wind 2, lead if you had a moving target, your time of flight, that's to those targets, the energy, impact energy at the target, the impact velocity, the current Mach value, these are all subsonic because they're below 1.0, your probability of hit for the current WEZ settings, and then the ability to delete them. All right. If you wanted to reset this target card because you had a bunch of entries, let's do that. Let's just pop in a bunch of entries. If I wanted to reset this now that I've got a ton of entries here, all that you have to do is just go Settings. We'll scroll down to where it says Clear the target card. We hit Clear. Clear the targets. Exit out of the settings, and it resets it. So you can quickly reset the target card by doing that. All right. Now, moving forward here, let's go ahead and move on to the range card. So the range card, this is also semi-customizable, but the range card assumes that all your environment and target information, inclination, direction of fire, wind speed 1, all of that is the same for every target. But what we can do with the range card is if I click this little settings icon here, I can set the start range, and I'll do that. I'll set it to 50 or something. We can set our increments. I'll do increments of 50. And we can set the stop range. I'll say a stop range of 1200. We'll hit apply. And so now the target card is customized. We'll expand this table. Is customized here to what we just set. You have the same variables as you did on the range card. You have the same variables as you did on the target card. Probability of hit. Here's your Mach indicators. Okay. Now something to note. I'm going to change profiles here real quick to show you something about the range card. So let's bring back up that 17 HMR. There we are. And we'll go back now. Now, you'll notice here that there's a zone here that's indicated in red. That's the transonic zone. So on your target card, when you're passing through, or range card, excuse me, range card, when you're passing through the transonic zone, you'll see that it actually indicates when you're within that transonic region. So before, here we're supersonic, transonic, and then subsonic. So do note that you have that information there at your disposal. And it is there for you to utilize. When you're using this, you could see that I would do a muzzle velocity calibration here and a DSF calibration here. Okay, so that information is there. Now, moving further down here, just note that any changes that you make will be made to the entire range card. You can export this range card, and the range card does have a reticle output display for the range card. We'll bring up the Reticle Controller here. So right now we're on solutions. So this is where your 1, 2, 250, 3, 350 would be held. That's also, I'm going to bring up the target card real quick. I'm going to jump back on the target card. Except in the target card, it shows you where targets Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. You get the gist of it, is where those targets actually are in your reticle view. And you do still have the subtension view if you wanted to flip over to that. So I'm going to go back to the range card now. Just wanted to touch on that for a brief moment. The range card is live. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to devices. Let's go ahead and talk about how to pair and utilize devices. All right, so we'll go to the devices menu here. If you want to know what devices are currently compatible with the app, you click the information icon. But let's go ahead and move down here and let's just select one of these. I'm going to pair a rangefinder here real quick. It should already be paired to the app. So let's go ahead and bring it up. Connecting, yes. All right, we'll input this pin code, 35. Not all devices do that, but some do, so that's a good thing to see. Now, here we have our current license level for this device, which is an elite device. If I open this up, I have the ability to remove or access some settings, device ID. We can see that it's paired up here, and down here you can see the Bluetooth symbol is lit up. So let's go ahead and go back to the shoot screen. I had mentioned before a couple of neat tricks that we could do, so let's go ahead and see that. So when you're paired to a rangefinder, not only will it feed the range into the app, you can actually build your range card with a laser rangefinder. So I'm going to step outside here for a minute and I'm going to laser a couple targets, and I want you to watch what happens inside of the app as I do this. So we'll go ahead and do, there's one target that's been added, target Foxtrot. Let's go ahead and add another one here. So I'm going to laser another target, and I'm going to laser maybe another target. There we go. So I've lasered a couple targets here at the range. And as you can see, it actually it generated those targets in the target card for us. Now, aside from generating those targets for us in the target card, it actually did more than that. It provided us with some unique data. If you remember earlier, I discussed how these targets can have individualized data. Well, you can see that the indicators are lit up here, showing us that that did happen. So let's go ahead and collapse this table down and let's look at what data we have. We'll pull up the target controller because it's target data. And you can see here the direction of fire and inclination for each of these targets is unique. So when using a laser rangefinder or other devices, depending on what kind of data they can provide, it'll actually provide unique data into AB Quantum for those targets and not just a generalized set of information. Now, I'm going to go ahead and move on to another new menu item that just popped up. This device has remote view. Some do and some don't. So let's go ahead and look at that. We can see what's going on. So this was 1,198 yards with a 17 HMR, 253 mils, by the way. And we can see all of the information from inside that SIG Kilo 10K Gen 2. Now, each product will be able to, you'll be able to get different sets of information depending on the sensors. But anything that's not grayed out, like the wind speed 1 and the latitude, we can actually customize that information as well. So in this case, I could change the wind speed directly from the app here, or change the wind direction and update that in the binocular remotely, which is really kind of cool. So let's go ahead and look at another device. just so you can see that there's different types of information that you can get from different devices. I'm going to power up a Kestrel 5700X WEZ model. So let's go ahead and do that. We can see it here in our list. So we'll bring that up into the active slot. Now, something to note here, at least in version 3.3, is only one device can be active. I can pair all of these devices. There's a Calypso and a SIG, and here's a Kestrel, but you need to select which one is currently active. Now let's go back to that shoot menu, and you can see all this information changed. We are on the remote view. You can see here we're on the device menu. And we have a different set of information because we have a different device. You can also see that we can manipulate different bits of information. And yes, despite the Kestrel being a wind meter, I can change the wind values on the Kestrel here remotely. I'll change this down to 2, and that's going to update here in the Kestrel for us. Yes, it did. And I changed wind speed 2 to 10 miles an hour. There it goes. It just updated. So I can change these values on the Kestrel remotely from AB Quantum. Here, I'll go back out. I'm now holding the Kestrel, and I'm going to update the range on the Kestrel, and you'll see the range updates in the app remotely as well. So it does work 2 ways, and there is different information, but you can tell what's manipulatable from inside the app because it's not grayed out. Any of these I can pull from the app. I can even update my latitude from my phone by clicking this button, and it will project that into the Kestrel. I can even update the target inclination from the phone using this button, and it will change the target inclination in the Kestrel, which is kind of cool. So there's some neat things that you'll be able to do now in the latest version of AB Quantum. With that being said, some of these devices also have live stream mode for wind. So if I go here and I go to the HUD, you'll see that we have a stream wind button now, and I can live stream the wind values off of that device. Let's go ahead and switch to another device because I want to demonstrate something else that we've implemented and you'll see more of with other products. I'm going to pair this Calypso. I'm going to bring this Calypso into play. We'll give it a minute here to connect. There it is. It's connected. And just give it a second to kind of start populating and thinking. We'll go here to the shoot menu. Now, there's no real live device remote view button for this particular device, and that's okay. But watch this. I'm going to stream the wind here, and you'll get live wind streaming off of that device here briefly. There you go. I did set it in front of a fan, and it doesn't really like the wind speeds that fan's providing, but you can see it functioning in real time here and operating in real time here. So we'll go ahead and we'll stop streaming now. But you do get that live wind capability with other devices, but also the Calypso has a neat trick, and that's that it can be paired to an app or a device. So the Kestrel, when you pair the Kestrel to a laser rangefinder, that's done on the Kestrel. It has a display where you can read and see what's going on. The Calypso doesn't, but it has this. So in the settings for the Calypso, I can pair it to a laser rangefinder directly from Quantum. And here's our Kilo 10K Gen 2. If there was another device visible, which let me bring another device into the equation here. Let me go turn another rangefinder on, and you'll see that you'll get options. So we'll go ahead and turn on the Leica. This is a Leica AB Plus rangefinder. It'll take a moment here. There it is. All right, it's in our menu here. So let's go ahead and go back into that Calypso, and let's look at our options. And now we compare it to either the Leica or the SIG, and so on and so forth with other devices. So some devices you can now manage them all from AB Quantum. You can update the Calypso's firmware inside AB Quantum. You can pair it to a laser rangefinder, and there will be more devices in the future that get more functionality. But that's the direction that the app is really headed. So with that being said, you'll notice that there's no buttons here for a device. So I want you to pay attention here, what you see here and what you see here. And now I'm going to switch back to the binoculars for a second because they provide some other data which could be useful. So let's go ahead, give it a minute to talk. Always give it a minute to kind of establish itself. And you can see here now there's a button for temperature. That's off of the device. There's a button here for pressure off the device, but also if we go here and we go to the target card, I can pull inclination and direction of fire directly off of that. Now I haven't lasered a target, at least not here in the office. So it's going to remember the last target that I did laser, which was at 339 degrees. And so it's going to have that information kind of stored. So if they lose connection sometimes, or if you don't update it, sometimes that residual data is still there to be used. All right? And that's using devices in AB Quantum. From here, we can use the plus symbol to move them up into the active slot. I can open this menu and we have our settings, or remove the device entirely. You can see here this has an elite license level. If I go to my settings page, all of our license levels are displayed here, and the app will take the highest of those license levels. So if I had a purchase level of ultralight and this was elite, it'll be elite. If you have a pro device like the Kestrel with a pro level license, let's see, this one, the Kestrel X WEZ model, should be able to turn this back on real quick. There we go. And then when you go to settings, you'll find that it has a pro level license. So just be aware the app does take the highest level license from the devices. With that being said, something to note is that if you have a subscription that's a pro level, but a device that's an ultralight level, the subscription level will not increase the device level. Only the device can increase the app level. Okay, so just keep that in mind. By purchasing pro level for AB Quantum will not change your Kestrel to a pro model Kestrel. Okay, that has to be done at the device level. So hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, of course, leave them in the comments, or use that support function from any page. You can tap here and then tap support if you need it. Otherwise, leave your questions in the comments. Please like and subscribe to these videos. I really hope this video was helpful. Thank you and have a good day.